Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Geezerology Gazette. We're going to give you a look at all the news that we're fit to discuss. And Bob's going to start us off as usual. What do you have for us this week, Bobby?
Okay, this week's going to be a little bit on the morbid side because we have a series of rock and roll obituaries to get into, unfortunately. Starting out, Ricky Lee Reynolds, founding guitarist of Southern rock band Black Oak, Arkansas, died September 5th. He was hospitalized for COVID and then suffered heart failure. He was 72. Reynolds hooked up with singer Jim Dandy Mangrum back in 1963 to form a band called the Nobody Else after they had met in junior high. And then they released an album under that name, and then in '69, the band signed to Atco Records and rebranded as Black Oak, Arkansas. And they debuted their first album in '71. And Reynolds was with the band pretty much from the very beginning right up until the end. And Black Oak recorded their last album in 2019, an album called Underdog Heroes. It was their first album, consisted of all new recordings in 30 years. And the album featured, Reynolds and Mangrum as the only original founding members. So rest in peace, Ricky Lee Reynolds.
Down there from our neck of the woods, when Bob and I, just folks who don't know the geography of southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, it's the Ozark Mountains there, and where we went to college at what is now Missouri State University. At the time was known as Southwest Missouri State University. Well, that's in Springfield, which is known as the Queen City of the Ozarks. So all that southwestern Missouri, northern Arkansas region where those mountains are all considered the Ozarks down there. That's where they're from, and that's probably why Bob and I were probably hyper aware of this band. They had a couple of hit singles back in the day. They had a couple of successful albums.
They've had some gold albums. They got a platinum album. They had hit singles, and they had a second wind for their career playing biker festivals. And like Steppenwolf,
really?
They became a really popular with bikers. And Reynolds, in an interview a few years ago, commented on that. And I saw Black Oak at the Shrine Mosque in Springfield, probably back 75 or 76, and it was an interesting show. And the frontman Jim Dandy put on quite a show, and then
that was about when they were at their peak.
They were at their peak, yes. Then I saw the band again late 90s, maybe early 2000s, and Jim Dandy came on with this leather belt that was probably about a foot wide, and he had it on there, and it was the hole in his stomach. Because like so many of the rest of us, he lost the battle of the bulge.
It wasn't a belt so much as a girdle.
Yeah. And, him strutting the stage just didn't look quite the same.
Yeah, it happens to the best of us, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. What was the guitarist's name? I'm sorry.
Ricky Lee Reynolds.
Ricky Lee Reynolds. R.I.P. Ricky.
Yeah. And then this is an interesting obituary. A lady named Sheila Bromberg, who was the first female musician ever to record on a Beatles album, died August 17th in a hospice center in England, and she was 92 years old. Bromberg was a busy harpist in British symphony orchestras when she got a call on March 17th, 1967, to do a 3-hour stint that night as a session musician at a recording studio on Abbey Road in London. She was paid $17 for the 3 hours. Arriving at the studio, she was handed a piece of sheet music. Only later did she learn that the notes she played were to be on the intro on She's Leaving Home by the Beatles. The song was released months later on the Sgt. Pepper's album. And She's Leaving Home was one of only a handful of tracks in the Fab Four's career on which they did not play any instruments but only sang. So
it was all I'd have to go back and listen to that song again. I mean, I know the song, but I can't it's not one of my top-notch Beatles songs, but that was basically just an orchestral.
Yeah, it was real heavy. Of course, it had her, harp intro and strings and orchestration and stuff. Yeah, so they didn't play any instruments on the song at all. So she has her footnote in rock and roll history, being the first woman to play on a Beatles album. And then here recently we had the bizarre death of Mick Brigdon, who's a tour manager for the Rolling Stones and also a manager of the supergroup Chickenfoot. He died September 5th following an accident in his home at Santa Rosa, California. And Brigdon was helping to dig a grave for the family's pet dog, and the walls of the grave collapsed in on him, and he died as a result. Native of England, he worked with acts like Joe Satriani, Carlos Santana, Bob Dylan, Mountain, and Peter Frampton. And he was mentored earlier in his career by promoter Bill Graham. And Brigdon and several others who worked with Graham purchased 90% of the company Bill Graham Presents, following Graham's 1991 death in a helicopter crash. And like I say, he's the manager of supergroup Chickenfoot, which features Satriani, Sammy Hagar, Michael Anthony, and Chad Smith.
Okay, run this past me again. He was digging a grave and the walls of the grave fell in on him.
Yes.
How big was this dog? What kind of dog?
Well, that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around too. And the story is that they were, the family dog was dying, and they knew that the end was near. So he was out digging the grave. I don't know how deep they dug it, but
it would have had to been pretty deep.
Well, see, the thing is, and I dealt with this, when I was still in the fire service, and we were trained about dealing with trench collapse. And once you get to a certain depth of digging, you're supposed to put up shoring along the walls. And if he had dug down even as little as 3 or 4 feet, and maybe if he was at the bottom of that and the walls collapsed in on him, it wouldn't take much, with the weight of all that dirt and the pressure and everything, for him to, suffocate. So I don't know how deep the grave was being dug. Those details haven't come out yet.
Yeah, we need an investigation on this.
That's where we are right now.
Something sounds a little weird about that.
Well, the original story.
I'm sorry to make light, but
Well, the original news story that came out referred to an unknown type of accident. And then his wife of 34 years, put out that he was digging this grave and it collapsed in on him. And by the time, I guess, he was dug out and taken to the hospital, he passed away.
Okay, come back with us over the next few weeks and tell us if there's more to that story. I think that sounds to me like there's more to that story.
Well, I thought that at first, but if he's committed to doing like a 6-foot grave, and he's dug down that far, and if the walls collapse in on him, by the time you can get dug out, it's extremely possible.
Yeah, my question is, why are you digging a 6-foot grave for your dog? But anyway, okay. That's probably the last we'll ever hear of it. But if something does happen, let me know.
I will backtrack on it. But anyway,
All right.
he's a very well-known insider in the rock world. And this is a double whammy for the Rolling Stones, because they just lost Charlie Watts. Now they've lost their tour manager.
Oh yeah! Wow! Yeah.
Okay, moving on. We're done with the death part of this, thankfully, but not quite done with aging rock stars. Progressive rock pioneers Genesis were going on a reunion tour later this year, and drummer Phil Collins will not be behind the drum kit. The 70-year-old Collins says he is no longer able to play the drums due to health issues. Collins said his son, Nick Collins, will be drumming with the band going forward. The elder Collins would just handle vocal duties. Collins also says this will probably be the last time he goes out on the road. So if you are a huge Genesis fan, this will probably be your last chance to see them.
Yeah, he's been in pretty bad shape for a few years. He had like a more than one. It seemed to me like he's had 3 or 4 surgeries with back and neck issues, and he's even said before, like a couple 3 years ago, when somebody floated the idea of a reunion of the 5-piece, including Peter Gabriel. Colin says, nah, he doesn't think that can happen because he just can't play the drums very much anymore. He did back then. He said he can't do it. He can't play the drums for a full show, and it just wouldn't be right. If having 2 lead singers and no drummer in this reunion. But this is new, where he's saying that he can't play them at all anymore. I did read further that he can't even hold a drumstick. His
Right.
hands are so weak he can't even hold a drumstick.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and
he's been in deteriorating shape for 3 or 4 years with back and neck issues. I know.
Right. Yeah, and he had back surgery in 2015, and then in 2017 he fell, and that wound up with him having to use a cane to assist with his walking. So
right, and yeah, I also read that this was on it was on a TV interview with the other 2 guys, Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford, were also there, and and the British press. I read a little bit in the British press that they're saying that he really looked frail in this TV appearance. So. Yeah, poor guy, but as I said before, we're at that age where all these people have been around it. I mean, yeah, we're in that time where these people are not able to do the job anymore. They keep trying, but they just can't do it anymore.
Yeah. Age catches up with all of us.
Age catches up with all of us.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on. The daughter of American Pie singer Don McLean has taken a $3 million hit for speaking out against her father. McLean, 75, says he cut off his daughter, Jackie McLean, financially after she gave a tell-all interview accusing him of mental and emotional abuse. And seems back in June, Jackie did an interview with Rolling Stone magazine in which she was quoted as saying there was a constant state of fear in their house growing up. And after that interview, McLean said she could say goodbye to his fortune. So she's been disinherited from a $3 million trust fund. And interesting, Jackie is a singer for an indie rock duo called Ramone Yellowthorn. And she said that her dad would turn into a crazy person over the slightest things when she was a child.
Wow.
And McLean vehemently denies her accusations, claiming that he had been a loving father who always supported his daughter until he cut her off. But there's also some dark sides to McLean. I believe there was an issue where he had abused his wife too. And I think the cops actually had to get involved with that. But,
families.
yes. So anyway, Jackie's paying a big price for speaking out about her dad. All right, last item. The life story of the man known as the 5th Beatle is going to be told in a biopic that's slated to start filming later this year. Okay, and Jacob Fortune Lloyd, who played chess prodigy and journalist D.L. Towns in The Queen's Gambit, has the lead role of Brian Epstein in the upcoming movie called Midas Man. And the plot tracks how Epstein shot to fame at the age of 25 by discovering a series of artists, including the Beatles, Cilla Black, and Jerry and the Pacemakers, before his life ended tragically at 32 over drugs. Epstein managed the Beatles from 62 until his death in 67. During that short time, he propelled the band to stardom and became known as the 5th Beatle. His death left a void in the group's organization, and many say that it contributed to the band's official breakup in 1970.
Yeah, he was definitely a center of gravity for them as far as not their music. He wasn't involved in their music, but he was the guy who made the Beatles what they were. I mean, he gets as much credit as anybody, besides the band's talent. I mean, the guy was young and eager, and he pulled all the right strings for him. Probably a couple of lucky breaks here and there for him, but he was the guy who made them, who made the Beatles, the capital T, capital B Beatles, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if memory serves me correctly, the manager that they brought in after Epstein caused a lot of controversy in the band.
Yeah, well, McCartney and McCartney wanted Linda Eastman's father to be their manager, and the other three wanted this Alan Klein.
Right.
And that caused a rift. That caused a rift that never got healed. Yeah. Yeah. McCartney basically wanted to become the boss, the way I understand it. McCartney basically wanted to become the boss, and his future father-in-law would help him become the boss and help him call the shots, and the other three weren't having any of it. Yeah. Anything else, Bob?
Oh, that's what I've got today. I'm going to kick it to you, Scott, for anything that you may have.
I just wanted to go off script a little bit, nothing to do with music, but I just want to say that we're all happy that Bob Odenkirk is back at work after 6 weeks off the job after having a heart attack on the set of Better Call Saul. I've never seen Better Call Saul. It's on my watch list. I'm one of those guys. I like to binge things, so I like to wait till the series are over and then watch them all straight through. So that's what I'm waiting on Better Call Saul. But Odenkirk was great, I know, in Breaking Bad.
Yeah. And
I've seen him in other things too. He's a very talented guy. And I remember when he had this heart attack 6 weeks ago, just the fact that they went into radio silence and nobody gave any, nobody told, they didn't say publicly what had happened to him, only that he got rushed off to a hospital and was in a hospital, and for about 24 hours, and people were worried. They thought maybe he was on his deathbed or something because they weren't saying anything, and then it turned out that it was a heart attack, and he's recovered from it, and he's back at work 6 weeks later. Welcome back, Bob.
Better Call Saul, as I'm sure most people know, is kind of a prequel to Breaking Bad,
right,
and it traces how the crooked lawyer Saul evolved, and the character starts out as kind of a schlub, and then over the course of the series, he morphs into this shyster crooked lawyer, and it's fascinating. It's quirky and a little bit more cerebral than Breaking Bad, but it's just fascinating to watch his character evolve. So you definitely need to see it.
Oh yeah, I will. Once they're in the final season, they're midway through the final season. So sometime in the next few months, the entire series will be up on Netflix, and that's when I'll dive into Netflix and dive into it. I just don't like to watch pieces and parts, because by the time I get back to it, I've forgotten what's happened before, and it just kind of loses the momentum. So that's what I'm waiting on. Okay, speaking of, as Bob did mention a little earlier, speaking of music documentaries, a guy at RogerEbert.com, his name Brian Tellerico, who's a movie reviewer at RogerEbert.com, went to the Telluride Film Festival in Toronto recently, where they premiered 3 music documentaries. And so he has a review. He has a piece on all 3 of these music documentaries, his review of all 3 of them at RogerEbert.com. So I just wanted to mention that. Go check it out. The films that he writes about are Hallelujah, Leonard Cohen, A Journey, a Song, which is a piece. Obviously, it's a biopic of Leonard Cohen, but but somehow the trajectory of the movie is tied to his song Hallelujah. The next one that he does is the one we mentioned last week, the Velvet Underground documentary that will show up on Apple TV Plus next month. He says that's really good. And the other one is called Bernstein's Wall, a documentary of Leonard Bernstein, the veteran, the old orchestra leader. So anyway, go check that out at rogerebert.com. I just wanted to mention that. I thought that might be of interest to everybody.
You know, it's interesting how many music documentaries are just popping up all over the place.
It seems to be a real thing right now, which it is great. You know, I watch a lot of them. I enjoy most of them.
I'm going to look forward to seeing the Hallelujah one because I'm interested to see how they handle that song because, you know, Cohen was a fantastic songwriter, but that song is so misunderstood. Right. And it's played so much as a spiritual song, even in churches and stuff. But if you listen to the lyrics, a lot of it's about sex.
Yeah,
you know, so.
I'm trying to. I'm thinking it was covered by a lot of people. I know Jeff Buckley. Jeff Buckley probably is most well known, has the most well known cover of it. John Cale covered it. Dylan covered it. Brandy Carlisle covered it. Somebody named Ratso Sloman. I don't know who that is, but yeah, it was one of his better known songs. Anyway, yeah, check that out. RogerEbert.com. Brian Tellerico. He's a good movie reviewer. If you're not familiar with him, you'll enjoy this. I just saw in the Washington Post today that there is a new documentary coming out about Alanis Morissette. And the documentary is going to be premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival next week. And there's most of the documentary is an interview with Alanis Morissette. And in the documentary, she reveals that she was a frequent victim back during her budding pop days before she became big with Jagged Little Pill. When she was a budding pop star in Toronto, you know, with a management machinery behind her, as budding pop stars tend to have back in the 90s and even today. But anyway, she revealed for the first time that there were several instances when she was 15, 16, 14 years old of a statutory rape of a few of her handlers having their way with her. It's pretty, you know, it's not shocking. You know, we know this stuff happens. We know how that works and everything. It's not shocking, but still, it's just when you hear this, it just, you know, it just makes the skin crawl. At least it does for me. She says in the interview that, quote, "I'm going to need some help because I never talked about this before." And then she says, "It took me years in therapy to even admit there had been any kind of victimization on my part. I would always say I was consenting, and then I'd be reminded that, hey, you were 15, you're not consenting at 15. Now I'm like, oh yeah, they're all pedophiles. It's all statutory rape." She doesn't name names, but she does say that there were 2 or 3 of them who did this to her. She said that she did tell a few people and it just kind of fell on deaf ears. It would usually be a stand up, walk out of the room moment when she would try to bring it up to people. Yeah, this is still you know, these floodgates opened up publicly. We always knew that this stuff happened, but these floodgates opened up publicly, mostly with the Harvey Weinstein stuff. and unfortunately, we're still hearing new instances of this happening. However, in line with this documentary now, Morissette, at the last minute, she is refusing to appear at this premiere on Tuesday in Toronto, and nobody knows why. She got mad about something, and nobody knows why. Those Washington Post reporters saw the documentary. Steven Zaitchik is his name. He saw the documentary and he reviews it, and he can't figure out what in the documentary that she's upset about. So it's a mystery of why she's mad, but the suspicion is that there are probably just a few small minor things in there. Her career has been so managed, and she's just held so much control over her career since she became big in the mid-90s. She might just be upset that a few things are there that she just didn't want people to know about, But anyway, that's going to premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival on Tuesday, and it'll appear later in the year on HBO. It's an HBO film.
Yeah. If I can tag on to that for a second. When I was doing clinical rotations to get my paramedic license, I had to do a couple of tours at a psychiatric unit at a hospital. And amongst the patients that I met was a young woman who had been repeatedly sexually abused by her brothers and her father. I mean, she was just passed around. Yeah. And ultimately she became pregnant and gave birth to a child. And so now, of course, she's in the psych unit for all of the emotional trauma that she went through. And then over the years, I've witnessed lots of harassment of women, particularly when I was in the fire service. And I even, brought testimony in several cases. So it is real, and it's sad that so often these women don't get believed. So.
Yeah. Well, at least now we've gotten to a point where most of these stories are coming out. We give some credibility to them. We give a lot of credibility to them, but it's still tough to hear this stuff.
Yes, it is.
Tough to hear
horrible.
this stuff. Hopefully this all gets fixed really, really fast. Yeah, I don't need to go further into that. Okay, and also I just wanted to mention that I picked up a free trial to Apple TV this week. Apple TV Plus is the official name of it. In anticipation of the Velvet Underground documentary coming out, and also because I did get a 4-month free trial of it, so it gives me plenty of time to check it out. But I discovered on it when I got it the other day, I discovered a documentary series called 1971, the year music changed everything, and apparently this was based on a book or inspired by a book with the same subject. I don't know the name of the book. It's a pretty interesting documentary. It's an 8-part series. Each episode is like 45 minutes and touches on different aspects of what was happening in music in 1971. I've seen about the first half of them, and it's all done with archival footage. It's archival videos, old interviews that are. The audio of the interviews are played over old videos and old photographs and things like that. So nothing, nothing that was produced, no content that was produced recently. It's all just stuff that came out of vaults and things like that. And it's pretty interesting watching this stuff. There's a lot of video content in there. I noticed in the first episode, there's a lot of video content of John Lennon and Yoko working on the Imagine album that I'd never seen before. That was really interesting. They had some video of behind the scenes at the George Harrison's concert from Bangladesh, and some videos of David Bowie's appearance at the big festival in Canada. I can't think of the name of it that year when he was still trying to uh, to become successful when he was still an unknown British weirdo. But anyway, it's pretty interesting. I'm a little frustrated because I have seen nothing yet 4 episodes in that supports the suggestion in the title. It says the year that music changed everything. All the stuff, everything that's happening in music, they put in context of what was happening in the world at the time, but it seems more like what was happening in the world at the time changed the music more than the music changed. It changed everything happened around it. But okay, it's a little hyperbolic title, whatever. It's interesting. If you have Apple TV Plus, go check it out. There's some stuff to like in there. It's not all real interesting, real exciting. It probably just depends on what your musical taste is and what your background is. But you'll find something to like if you check this thing out on Apple TV Plus. Have you seen any of this thing, Bob?
Yeah, I've seen the first 3 episodes, and I thought it was I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah.
I've had so many other things going on that I haven't circled back to finish it,
Yeah.
but it's on my list to finish up the last episodes of it. But I did find it was interesting. Haven't really figured out why they figured 1971 was so pivotal.
Well, there was basically what it was. Just to put it in a nutshell. I mean, that was the year that we did find out that the Beatles broke up. It was just right at the end of 1970 or the beginning of 1971. So now all the Beatles were going on their own separate ways, and there was all these things happening that were kind of moving into this vacuum that the Beatles had left, right? And in 1971, I mean, that was the Rolling Stones were hitting a peak then. The episodes I've seen, what I've seen is it's the emergence of glam rock. So one episode was pretty much about Mark Bolan and Bowie and their emergence. Another episode was keyed on female singer-songwriters at the time. Joni Mitchell had her biggest hour in 1971 with Blue. That was the year of Carole King's Tapestry. James Taylor was just becoming emerging that year. So there were just a lot of different things. That was, I mean, think about that. I'm talking through this. I mean, was 1971 just a really key pivotal year? Because how during the 70s, how rock music just splintered off in 90 different directions. And talking this through, maybe 1971 was a pivotal year for that. And all of a sudden you got the glams going, you got the proggers going over here, you got the singer-songwriters going here, and like all of these different things were just emerging in this vacuum that the Beatles had left. Right?
Yeah, I just recently finished reading a book called Rock Me on the Water, which did sort of a similar thing, only the author of this book really centered heavily on the year 1974 and centered it quite a bit in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. But he broadened it out, and he did music, movies, and television, and tied them all together. And talked about the new movies coming out like Chinatown, how television changed with All in the Family and some of those shows, and they got into the music. So it's a very similar thing, very interesting.
Yeah, that was a decade. That was a decade where our culture as defined by different forms of media were just exploding, right?
Yeah, because you went from Petticoat Junction and the Beverly Hillbillies, to All in the Family and Maude and a lot of these socially based shows.
Even in movies, a lot of movies, Chinatown and all Chinatown and Five Easy Pieces. I keep thinking of Jack Nicholson movie, Easy Rider. But a lot of these directors and a lot of these movie makers and a lot of these stars were they were rebels. and during that decade is when they had this explosion of these people just feeling feeling free to do whatever they wanted to do instead of just following in the footsteps of everybody who's gone before. It's like everybody said, I want to do it my way instead of everybody wanting to do it the studio's way, right?
Well, I remember, what a earthquake All in the Family was to the TV industry.
Yeah.
And even so, I think if I remember correctly, even there was you'd hear a toilet flushing when Archie went to the bathroom, and that was just like, oh my God,
that was
flushing on TV.
Yep.
Big cultural changes, no doubt about it.
Okay, 55 years ago, speaking of cultural changes, 55 years ago was the airing of the first episode of The Monkees on NBC. 1966, 12th of September, 1966.
And do you know who one of the people was who auditioned for that TV series?
Who?
Stephen Stills.
Really?
Yes.
You know what? I've heard that before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that you mention that, I have heard that. Yeah, and it also caused David Bowie to become. Let me go back. It also became David Jones of Britain to become David Bowie because Davy Jones of the Monkees already had the rights to the name David Jones. Also today is the 18th anniversary of the death of Johnny Cash. He was around. He died of respiratory failure at age 71. I thought he was older than that when he died.
Yeah, I did
he was only 71 years old. He was known as a Man in Black. Boy Named Sue was his biggest hit, but that was more of a novelty song for him, but it became his biggest hit. He also had his own TV show for a few years in the late 60s and early 70s. Johnny Cash, who's influenced everybody. He's one of those guys who everybody points to Johnny Cash as an influence. Country and rock.
Yeah,
right?
I remember watching his show when I was really young.
Yeah,
and he opened up. He had Bob Dylan on there, Linda Ronstadt, a lot of people who were not traditional country. So,
right.
And
he helped kind of cross over, right?
He did. And Boy Named Sue was written by Shel Silverstein.
That's right. A former comic artist for Mad Magazine, right?
Yeah, and a songwriter for a lot of Dr. Hook stuff.
Exactly, and wrote a lot of children's books. Yeah. Monday will be the 56th anniversary of the release of the Paul McCartney song, not the Beatles song, the Paul McCartney song, yesterday. It was released as a Beatles song, but it was a Paul McCartney song. He was the only one that had anything to do with it. His vocal and acoustic guitar with a string quartet was essentially the first solo performance by a Beatle, right? It was on the Rubber Soul album, I believe. Yeah.
And I think the most covered Beatles song in history.
Yes, I have heard that. I didn't have a note of that, but I have heard that before. It was the other band members actually vetoed the release as a song in the United Kingdom. So it was issued. It was issued as a single only in the United States. Was a big hit. It wasn't issued as a single in the United Kingdom until 11 years later in 1976, long after the Beatles had disbanded. I didn't know that. I just read that. Yeah,
I did not know. So what was the issue with releasing it in England? Did it say?
The other band members vetoed it, and I guess it must have been some contractual thing where Capitol Records in the U.S. It was released on the album, but it just wasn't released as a single in the UK. It must have been some sort of contract.
Well, I know there's many times there was a big difference between an album or Beatles stuff released in England as opposed to how it was released in the US.
Up until that time, that all ended with Sergeant Pepper's and Magical Mystery, Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane. About that time, it all became simultaneous. But up until 1967, it was all releases in the US were drastically different than what they did in the UK. Also, Monday is the 52nd anniversary of the Rock and Roll Revival Show in Toronto, which you've talked about a few times and written
Yes,
about.
I have.
Yep. That was John Lennon and Yoko Ono put together the first version of the Plastic Ono Band to perform at the Rock and Roll Revival Show. It became the first official solo performance of a Beatle. Right. They drafted Eric Clapton, Klaus Vormann, and Alan White to perform on stage with them at the Rock and Roll Revival Show. Also appearing at that show were Chuck Berry, Gene Vincent, Bo Diddley, Alice Cooper, and The Doors. And it was later released in the 1969 album Live Peace in Toronto. Okay, Monday is the 25th anniversary of the death of Tupac Shakur, who was shot 6 days earlier when he was driving through Las Vegas. Somebody fired like 13 bullets into his BMW. It was during this turf war between East Coast and West Coast gangs and rappers, and so glad those days are over. Also on Monday is the second anniversary of the death of Eddie Money, who died of cancer in 2019. Had a lot of hits in the 70s.
I wonder if he got his ticket to paradise.
2 tickets to paradise, right? Tuesday, 53 years ago, Tuesday, Roy Orbison's house in Nashville burnt down, and it killed 2 of his sons in the fire. I never knew this story. I just read this.
I did not. I know he lost his wife. I didn't know about the sons.
Yeah, he was on tour in the United Kingdom when this happened. So now again, another TV debut. A couple of years after the Monkees, a couple of years and a couple of days after the Monkees, on Tuesday is a 53rd anniversary of the first episode of The Archies. An animated version of the longtime comic book and cartoon strip, and it actually it made the Archie gang into a rock and roll band. And
Sugar.
Yeah. It spawned a couple of big hits back in the day. Sugar, Bang Sang a Lang. Remember, Sugar was the one that the last song.
I'm so ashamed I remember that.
Bang Sang a Lang. Bang Sang a Lang was their first hit. They were not a one-hit wonder. They had 3 or 4 hits. It's just that Sugar is the only one that people remember. This, as was the Monkees TV show, this was a product of Don Kirshner, who was behind this. Wednesday is the 60th anniversary of the appearance of the first recording session of a band from Hawthorne, California called the Pendletones. You ever heard the Pendletones?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, you've heard the Pendletones. They recorded a single called Surfin', and they later changed their name to the Beach Boys.
I was going to guess that, but I thought, no, I'm not going to make a fool of myself.
Yeah. Anyway, 60 years ago, Wednesday was their first recording session. Wednesday is the 17th anniversary of the death of Johnny Ramone, also known as John Cummings. He was the guitarist for the Ramones. He died after a 5-year battle with prostate cancer. Wednesday is the 13th anniversary of the death of Pink Floyd keyboard player Richard Wright. It's also on Wednesday, the 2nd anniversary of the death of Rick Ocasek, who was found dead in his home, former frontman of the Cars. Thursday, this one, I cringe every time I hear about this. Thursday is the 58th anniversary of the release by Swan Records in the US of the Beatles song She Loves You, the first single issued in the US on the Swan Records label, 58 years ago Thursday. And I'm telling you, I talked about this a week or two ago. When I was a kid, I had this single. I had a copy of this single. God, I wish I knew what happened to that thing.
Oh man, can you imagine what that would be worth?
I specifically remember when I was a kid in like the 4th and 5th grade. I've told you the story about how my grandparents owned a tavern, and the guy would change out the jukeboxes, and when they pull the records out, the 45s records out of the jukeboxes, they'd just collect them all in a big box, and when that box would get full, my grandparents would bring me that box of records, and I remember that was one of them, and I had it. And oh my God, I have no idea what happened. It's like all the baseball cards that I had back in the day, just kind of tossed them out when I got tired of them, right? Thursday, had another death anniversary on Thursday, the 44th anniversary of the death of Mark Bolan, T-Rex frontman. He was killed in a car accident, the car driven by his girlfriend, singer Gloria Jones. She lost control of the car and hit a tree in London. She broke her jaw, and Mark Bolan lost his life. He was at the time, he was the T-Rex mania had subsided by this point, and Bolan had essentially by this time become a solo artist, and was still releasing some pretty good albums at the time, but his comet had already flown past at this time, and he was sort of becoming a legacy act about the time that this happened. He was still only 29 years old when he died. Also on Thursday, the 12th anniversary of the death of Mary Travers, who died from leukemia at the age of 72, of Peter, Paul, and Mary. Friday, you'll like this one, Bob. 90 years ago Friday, RCA Victor made a demonstration of the first 33 1/3 RPM long playing record. Right?
Interesting. Yeah.
Right? It bombed. It bombed because it was doomed to fail because the high price, because record players that to play it on were cost so much they couldn't, people couldn't afford the record players. It cost $95 for a record player to play this thing on. So RCA Victor had a bomb in their hands in 1931, and then they eventually revived the idea in 1948, 17 years later, and it became a success.
Interesting.
They sat on it for 17 years, not because of the cost of the product itself, but the cost of the record player that you needed to use the product, right?
So was there some kind of substantial difference between a record player that went at 78 as opposed to one that would turn slower? Because ultimately, I mean,
I'm sure at that time, I mean, the people who built the record players probably pretty much had to reinvent the wheel. I mean, you put adjustable change the speed on it, adjustable speed. I'm sure there weren't a whole lot of options back in 1931. That would be my guess. I mean, I'm
just wondering if there was something more to it than just slowing down the speed of the turntable. There had to have been more to it than just slowing it down.
Well, probably the pivot of the arm, because
I wonder if it had something, back then, weren't they still using those really thick needles?
And it very well could have been that. I mean, that probably a whole lot of things. Yeah, it's a whole lot of things. Like I say, they probably would have had to reinvent the wheel. Well, they probably did reinvent the wheel because that they were producing these things, but it just, they were so expensive that people couldn't afford to buy them. Actually, yeah, $95 is what one of those record players costs. And I did look it up. In today's dollars, that would be $1,140. So yeah, that's $1,100 turntable that, yeah. Okay, Friday is the 54th anniversary of the Doors being banned from the Ed Sullivan Show. The producers of the show insisted to Jim Morrison that he not sing the line, "Girl, we couldn't get much higher," in the song "Light My Fire," because they considered that a drug reference. The Doors agreed to do that, but then they went on live TV, and Morrison sang the song anyway. They also performed their new single "People Are Strange" on that episode, and they never appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show again.
But they got there to begin with, so
they got there to begin with. Well, that's what Manzarek said in interviews. When he talked about that later, he would always say, "Well, we didn't care because we've done the Ed Sullivan Show."
Contrast that with the Rolling Stones when they went on there to do let's spend the night together.
Yeah,
and they
let's spend some time together, right?
And they caved.
They caved, right.
Doors had more integrity than the Rolling Stones.
Morrison wouldn't cave. Yep. Okay. What day we're on? Friday, 17th of September, 1969, 52 years ago. Media on both sides of the Atlantic began running stories that said Paul McCartney had died. He was supposedly killed in a car accident in Scotland on November 9th, 1966, 3 years before that. And these media reports are saying that a double had been taking his place for public appearances of the Beatles ever since. If you remember, I do remember when this became a thing, and people kept coming up with all these different clues that the Beatles were giving us, these subtle clues that Paul was actually dead. And there's actually at the end of the song "I Am the Walrus," where they have all that distorted fade out on there. John Lennon distinctly says in a real distorted voice, "Paul is dead." But that was all tied in with whatever the mythology with the walrus that Lennon was singing about at the time.
Wasn't there also something about the Abbey Road picture where he was barefoot that had some kind of significance?
Right. The other thing on the Abbey Road picture, see the white Volkswagen Bug there.
Right.
This is not the same picture. That's not the same Volkswagen Bug. They've just reproduced this picture for this tapestry that I have. But the license plate on that white Volkswagen Bug on the cover of Abbey Road says 28IF, and so that was interpreted to mean that Paul would be 28 if he were still alive. And there were like a gazillion things like that. People were playing Beatles records backwards, looking for clues. It became a pretty big thing. Paul and his girlfriend Jane Asher happened to be on vacation in Kenya at the time that all these media stories started breaking. And they didn't hear them for a few days, so that kind of fed into the narrative that nobody's heard from Paul, and Paul isn't turning up to dispute these stories, so it must be true, right?
And it's also interesting how widespread those kind of rumors became.
Oh yeah,
without the internet.
Without the internet, exactly. Without the internet, this was before QAnon.
Yep.
Right. Friday, another anniversary, the 43rd anniversary in 1978. The video for Queen's single "Bicycle Race" was filmed at Wimbledon Stadium in the United Kingdom. What makes this interesting is that the video featured 65 naked female professional models racing around the stadium's track on bicycles. And the company who rented the bicycles to the video crew, they heard about what happened, and how this video was shot. So they demanded that the that Queen and the video company pay them for all the bicycle seats. Because they thought they were going to have to replace these bicycle seats.
Oh, you know what I just flashed to? National Lampoon magazine. Remember the scratch and sniff bicycle seat?
Yeah, that's right. But this company running the bicycles, they demanded that they pay them for 65 bicycle seats are going to have to be replaced after these naked women are riding the bikes. Okay, another death anniversary. Man, we're full of these things. Saturday is the 51st anniversary of the death of Jimi Hendrix. Member of the 27 Club, he choked on his own vomit. Hendrix left a message, "I need help, bad man," on his manager's answering machine earlier that night. So, yeah, it was bad time. That was a rough time. Yeah, all kinds of conspiracy theories flew out of that. I won't go into that. Saturday is the 30th anniversary of the death of Rob Tyner, lead singer of the MC5. He died. He suffered a heart attack in the seat of his parked car in his hometown of Berkeley, Michigan. That was in 1991. Birthdays. Today would have been the 69th birthday of Neil Peart, drummer of Rush, who died in 2020 of brain cancer. Today is the 27th anniversary of, I'll see if you picked up on this. This is a follow-up of a couple weeks ago. Today is the 27th birthday of Kim Nam-joon.
Okay, why am I drawing a blank?
Korean boy band BTS.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm like,
the next one,
how did I not know that?
The next one that comes up will be the third one, and you'll get it the next time. They became the first Korean act to top the U.S. Billboard chart with their studio album Love Yourself in 2018. Monday is the 80th birthday of David Clayton Thomas, former lead singer of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, who actually wrote the song Spinning Wheel, which was a #2. And he was also the lead singer of their 1968 album, which Bob and I talked about a few weeks ago on Geezerology on YouTube. Okay, Monday is the 77th birthday of former Chicago bassist Peter Saterra, who had a few hits as a solo artist in the mid-'80s. Saterra was the lead singer on 25 or 624. A marvelous voice. They had 3 lead singers in that band. All 3 of them were excellent. And Saterra was a hell of a bass player. He was very good. But anyway, and he, like I say, he had a pretty good solo career in the mid-'80s after he left Chicago. Monday is the 56th birthday, 56, 5'6", born in 1965, Zach Starkey, son of Ringo.
Ringo's son, yeah.
Yeah. Tuesday would have been the 38th birthday of Amy Winehouse, who died in 2011. She died 10 years ago. Wow, that long ago. She was a member of the 27 Club. Tuesday would have been the 80th birthday of, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, Signa Tolley Anderson. She was the original lead singer of Jefferson Airplane before Grace Slick, right?
Right.
Yeah, she died 5 years ago. Thursday would have been the 96th birthday of B.B. King, who died in 2015 from a series of small strokes. Thursday will be the 73rd birthday of Kenny Jones, formerly of the Small Faces and The Who. He was the guy who replaced Keith Moon in The Who as a drummer. Friday would have been the 88th birthday of Janine Deckers. She had a hit single as the Singing Nun, a hit single in 1963 called Dominique. Right.
Right, I remember that.
She, you remember her, the Singing Nun?
Yes, I do.
Sally Fields, they did a TV show
Yeah,
based on her. Yeah. I remember that song too,
I
Dominique.
do too. I didn't know the name, but when you said the
Yeah,
song, I Dominique or whatever it was called. Yeah, I remember
yeah.
that.
Janine Deckers was her name. She died in 1985 of an overdose of sleeping pills and a suicide pact with her lover. Yeah.
So I'm assuming that she stepped away from her nunnery.
You gotta think. Friday, the 71st birthday of Fee Waybill, the lead vocalist of the Tubes. Remember them?
Yeah, I do. White Punks on Dope.
White Punks on Dope. And that was in 1977. They also had a number 10 single in 1983 with She's a Beauty. This occurred to me when I read it's his birthday. That I became kind of obsessed a few weeks ago with the band Sparks, when I found out that they were building that documentary on them. And this dawned on me when I read that this was Fee Waybill's birthday of the Tubes. It dawned on me that Sparks were another version, or Sparks were an American band, but they became big in England, right? Tubes were an American band, but it's almost like Sparks was like the British version of the Tubes.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. I mean, I just flashed on that. It's just sort of that same sort of off-kilter sense of humor that they have about them, where there is much strangely humorous performance art as they are musicians, right? Okay, let's wrap this up. Next Saturday will be the 82nd birthday of Frankie Avalon, former teen idol who became a big star, co-starring with Annette Funicello in the Beach movies. Right?
Yeah, the overdeveloped
The late
Musketeer.
60s, right? And another Ramone, Dee Ramone, would have been 69 on Saturday. He died of a drug overdose in 2002. And that's anniversaries and birthdays. Bob, we've been at this about an hour. Do you have anything quickly that you want to add, or?
I think I've exhausted my level of knowledge for the day.
Okay. Okay, everybody. So that's Geezerology Gazette for Sunday, September the 12th. We'll be back on Sunday, September the 19th with another edition. Join Bob and I. By the way, Dee, as many of you probably noticed, Dee is off on a vacation trip this weekend. He went on a baseball trip with a buddy of his into Chicago, see a couple baseball games. So he's not with us today. He'll be back with us next week. Bob and I will be back on Wednesday. We're going to do something a little bit different than we've been doing recently. Bob and I decided that we're going to tell you about what our desert island disc would be if we got arrested, got sentenced to go off on a desert island by ourselves, and we're allowed to bring 3 albums with us. We're going to tell you what 3 albums those would be. So join us on Wednesday for that. Join us next Sunday for more news and Geezerology Gazette, and we'll see you then. Thanks, everybody.